What do you think the future looks like? You've probably got some kind of pre-made image of what you think it might look like, or some particular piece of media that you've watched that you thought made the future look cool, but futuristic architecture doesn't just look like one thing. There's actually loads of things that can look like, and today I'd like to check out some cool examples. I'm doing so as someone who isn't an architect, so if there are any architects watching this, forgive me for all of the mistakes I'm definitely going to make. I'm a filthy casual. I'm a cool location enjoyer, so let's go ahead and enjoy some cool locations. Alright, so imagine it's the early 20th century. You've never heard of a Tamagotchi or a nuclear bomb. What does the future look like under that circumstance? Well, it might look like Art Deco, not to be confused with Fart Gecko. Art Deco was basically the future according to rich people in the 1920s. Everything's gold and symmetrical and aggressively geometric. If I had to explain this style to someone who's only ever seen a brutalist building before, I'd describe it like someone taught a skyscraper how to wear jewelry. You can tell this is around the time that people were really figuring out heavy industry, like we could use chrome and plastic and steel for the first time. Art Deco just feels very forward-looking and optimistic about the future, and it gives off the vibe that everyone's very happy about the fact that you can still smoke indoors and die at the age of 43 from industrial varnish poisoning. Next up, we've got Space Age. This might be kind of an amalgamation of a few different styles, but you know what I mean by Space Age. It kind of leans into the whole space race vibe. Everything seems to be inspired by rockets and satellites and atomic-era optimism. Regular buildings look like they're trying to look like how people in the 50s thought moon bases would look. You know, lots of curves and dramatic engineering statements. I mean, it's very exciting to look at. It's fun. A little goofy, but fun. You know, it's like we just decided everything should resemble a flying saucer or a breast implant, and it kind of neatly slots into that period of history before we realized nuclear annihilation is probably not a good idea. There's a few other styles that you can pull out that are kind of similar to Space Age, but a little different. There's Streamline Modern, which is like a smooth aerodynamic transition between Art Deco and the more Space Age type stuff. It's very inspired by airplanes and trains and ocean liners. It's just screaming, look at us and how good our industry and technology is. Everything just looked fast and sexy. You know someone's doing something right if you want to fuck a bus station. Another related style is Googie. I've never heard of Googie before, but I was just ironically Googling around and thought I saw the word Google when it was actually Googie. Now, while I'd never heard the word before, I've definitely seen this style a lot. Again, it's kind of related to these sort of retro styles, and I think at the time it felt very futuristic, although to me now it feels old-fashioned. Kind of makes me think of the Jetsons or something. Or maybe the Cars movie. Seems to be the style that every American petrol station and diner went for back in the day. Sorry, I should say gas station. Gas for that liquid derived from petroleum. It's fine. It's fine. No, settle down, King Charles. Just give him a couple hundred more years. They'll snap out of it. Anyway, next we got mid-century modern. This was a new architectural style that came about after World War II. It's very clean and practical and modern. It's focused on simplicity and openness. There's lots of sort of open plan stuff going on and kind of new, interesting materials. I feel like it brought in a lot of the streamlined and curvy shapes from the previous styles, but just subdued it down and simplified it until it was real fucking classy. If you ever find yourself watching a documentary where some divorced architect explains wooden chairs to you, he's probably sitting in a room that looks mid-century modern. It's weird because due to the generation that I'm in, part of me looks at this style and goes, yeah, that's an old person's style, because the people who were young and buying houses when this was a thing are the same people who are about my grandparents' age. But then again, I also think of The Incredibles, and The Incredibles was cool as fuck. The first one, not the second one. The second one was fine, but the first one, holy moly. Imagine this being the media environment around you while you're first entering puberty. I was spoilt by my first boners. Next up, we've got a style that a lot of people really hate, and I'll be honest, it's not exactly completely unwarranted. Brutalism. It's very bold and very heavy. It's known for lots of raw concrete and fortress-like buildings. Or really, to me, when I see one that I don't like, it kind of looks like someone just didn't care what the building looked like. They were just building it to serve the function that it needed to serve. It's like ultimately utilitarian. And the style kind of came about with that in mind. Although I've got the slightly weird take that if you were really designing the ultimately utilitarian building, you would still care what it looks like. Hopefully not at the cost of all the other things that it needs to do, but part of its function is to be looked at by humans, so if it makes you feel miserable, then what's the fucking point? Anyways, to the designers of this sort of thing, the point was to be completely functional, totally honest about its construction, as in the materials that you can see are the materials that are structurally holding the building together. And it was also a staple of post-war rebuilding because it's kind of cheap, and the world had a lot of cities that had been just completely demolished demolished, so we needed to make new stuff quickly. So we went ahead and made massive concrete slabs to make buildings out of, ones that can withstand explosions and joy, presumably. Really, people either seem to think it looks like dystopian sci-fi genius or like a Soviet parking garage designed to specifically make you as depressed as humanly possible. I can just imagine one of these buildings with Ministry of Joy written along the side of it. Truth is, for me, Brutalism is kind of hit or miss. Some buildings I fucking hate. I think they look just terrible. But there are instances that I actually kind of like, and it's a little hard to put my finger on exactly why I like some of them. I think maybe when they become so simple and monolithic that it looks kind of minimalist and intentional, and there's also fewer places for streaks of black dirt to latch onto. I think that's when sometimes it can kind of come full circle and I sort of like it again. But I think most of it, if I'm honest, looks like a sack of dog shit. But but hey, that's just me. Next, we've got one that I only heard of recently, Metabolism. It's a Japanese futurist movement that imagines cities like living systems that should kind of grow and change and evolve over time. Like you should take out bits of the building and replace them when they get old, or when you just need them to do something different. Now, while I haven't heard the name before, again, this is one that I definitely have seen. Like growing up, I really used to like the Venus Project, and the whole vibe behind the architecture of that was like commissioning a city as one giant integrated system, and if it needs to change over time, you'd kind of swap things out modularly. And that has a lot of overlap with Metabolism, although when you Google this style, like half the Google images are just this one building. Kind of looks like a beehive made of washing machines. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's a lot of buildings that currently use this style. I mean, in my head, if you're planning on removing and replacing parts of a building, like actually doing that and not just having it be kind of the cool concept behind the style of the building, that is like a continuous commitment on the part of whatever company made the building. So I can see why that hasn't necessarily taken off given the economic incentives involved, but it's still a pretty cool idea. Like imagine if you could just make the skeleton of a building to be universally compatible with incrementally more advanced room modules or whatever. Like, I don't know, what if you were living in a house that was like 500 years old, but you've specifically customized it to a room layout that you wanted? So the macroscopic structure stays the same, but the specific rooms in the specific layout that you want were just assembled in a factory recently and shipped out and plugged into the building. I feel like that's maybe the dream. Not sure if it's ever going to be a thing, at least not till you do the Venus Project thing of making cities as one giant unit, but it's a cool idea. I should really do a video on the Venus Project. Sorry to interrupt, this is just a quick message to say, statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so I'll make you a deal. Press the subscribe button and I won't come over to your house and do this.
The heart of discipline. Do you live in a cave?
Alright, thanks. Back to the video. Next up, and I just threw this one in because it's fun, is kind of the Y2K vibe. Now, this might be stretching it a bit. Not really sure if you can call this an architectural style. It's maybe more interior design. But the late 90s and early 2000s definitely had a vibe around them, specifically insofar as how people thought the future would look. If you've ever seen that Frutigia Aero design language, like old computer desktop wallpapers that had a bunch of dolphins and shit. I don't know why they all had dolphins. That seems to be a recurring theme with Frutigia Aero for some bizarre fucking reason. It does look cool though. The greater theme seems to be sort of bubble-shaped objects. I think you can see this in car design a lot. If you look at the early 2000s, I actually remember really hating this and being sick of how modern cars looked when the 2000s were modern. Because yeah, everything just looked kind of bubbly. I felt like the 80s and 90s, everything was sharp and aggressive, and then it just became very blobby and meh. But in the context of architecture, I think it does actually look pretty cool. Specifically when you integrate it with technological interfaces and stuff. You know, we're talking like translucent materials, metallic surfaces, soft curves, bright whites. Feels very futuristic, but in kind of a playful way. I guess it was from the era where everyone thought the internet would make everyone happy instead of fucking clinically insane. I don't think we've ever recovered to this level of optimism. Also, now that I'm looking at it, it kind of looks like a nightclub urinal. Alright, let's move on. Next we've got Solarpunk. Solarpunk is very cool and it's quite a varied aesthetic because it can go more futuristic or it can go more kind of rustic. It's kind of an optimistic, environmental focused type of futurism, focused on like sustainability and greenery and renewable energy and that kind of stuff. It's unique in being almost exclusively positively thought of. Like I've never heard someone shit on Solarpunk. Everyone seems to like it. I'm sure there must be some turbo conservative somewhere that thinks this style is some kind of homosexual libtard propaganda, but ironically that's seems like the kind of thing someone would think if they needed to get some bitches on their dick. This style is kind of rare in sci-fi universes because this is like a setting where everything worked out. I do think the real world will adopt this kind of vibe at least a little bit, or well, to be specific, I wouldn't be surprised if the next 100 or 200 years is us incrementally fucking up the environment more and more and more, triggering a bunch of irreversible tipping points and shit, unless we do something about it. And I could see this being kind of the counterbalance when we finally snap out of it and go in the other direction. Although I'm saying that, by then we'll probably have viable nuclear fusion or whatever, so you may or may not actually need wind turbines at that point, but you know what I mean. Like if we incrementally pave over more and more and more of the planet, if we want to keep ecosystems alive, and have humanity actually establish some kind of equilibrium with nature, either we draw hard boundaries around where we allow ourselves to expand, or we just integrate nature into urban environments. Probably a bit of both. This whole thing is basically, what if technology helped people instead of harvesting their dopamine like a fucking combine harvester? Alright, next we've got Cyberpunk, which is Solarpunk's evil twin. It's basically the exact opposite of Solarpunk. It's a dark, high-tech, urban style, inspired by corporatism, overcrowded megacities, neon advertising, general social decay. If you like this one, then good news, this is probably where we're heading. Personally, I think of Blade Runner when I think of Cyberpunk, although obviously there is the video game called Cyberpunk 2077, but I feel like Blade Runner was the earliest version of this, although now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm not actually sure. Obviously the first Blade Runner film came out before the video game did, but were there any earlier examples? Tell me in the comments. Anyway, this does look really cool. Like, if we embrace this kind of architecture, it doesn't mean that the world has to be an evil, terrible place, but usually when you see this in games or movies or whatever, it's a sign of like late stage capitalism and, you know, needing a subscription for your own lungs or whatever. Super sick vibe for a fictional universe. I mean, it's even a sick vibe for like a downtown area of a city, but if you had to spend all day every day in a place that looked like this, you'd probably be jamming neon glow sticks up your arse just to feel something. Next up, we've got Neofuturism, which might be my favorite architectural style. It's really cool. It's kind of like if Cyberpunk wasn't evil looking, not necessarily by covering everything in plants like Solarpunk does, but it's still very kind of white and airy and, you know, there's lots of glass. I suppose it's kind of ambiguous in terms of how it's meant to make you feel. It's kind of between Cyberpunk and Solarpunk. Like, you could drop me in a city that looks like this and tell me it's a futuristic autocratic dictatorship, or tell me it's a futuristic utopia, and I'd kind of believe you either way. What it really does focus on, though, is advanced engineering mixed with a kind of minimalism. It's inspired by like computers and aerospace design. It just looks highly engineered, and the buildings feel kind of sculpted to fit the exact purpose that they serve. I consider myself someone that likes modern architecture, but when I think of modern architecture, this is what I'm thinking of. Whereas I hear a lot of people say that they hate modern architecture, but I think that what they're thinking of a lot of the time is this kind of thing. Yeah, fuck that. That looks like a pile of shit. But this, holy fuck, this is cool. This is some Mirror's Edge shit. And you don't see a lot of examples of this in real life, but you do see some. A lot of them are rich countries trying to flex their GDP through architecture, but if you ignore all the stupidity and human suffering that goes into them, they do look pretty cool. I mean, this one's in my city. I walk past this like every other day. Although in my opinion, this is kind of a goofy example of this style. I never really know what it's meant to look like. The building itself is a transport museum, but it should have been a medical museum, given that this looks like the trace of someone actively having a heart attack. I want to finish up with a style that I've literally just discovered tonight, called Parametricism, which sounds like an alien disease, but Parametricism is kind of like if you took Neofuturism to the ultimate extreme. It's like, what if we designed neo-futuristic buildings, but instead of us actually designing them, we just got algorithms to design them for us? Like, no two buildings really look the same, because the constraints on different buildings might be different. Like the type of soil, or the wind loads or something, or stuff like that changes literally from one building to the next one. And if you're really, really hyper-optimized and factored all that stuff in, different buildings would have like walls at different angles and stuff to try and compensate for whatever conditions they're trying to conform themselves to. Everything's like this weird kind of sort of artificial looking but sort of organic looking mathematically generated curve. It's like if you designed a shape of pasta in fluid dynamics software. It's very cool. I'm not sure how practical it necessarily is if you're trying to make every single building look different to all the other buildings, but I don't know, if you're like 3D printing everything or something, I suppose it doesn't really matter. Or if every building's put together by robotic arms in a factory and just pushed out the door and automatically transported to wherever it is it needs to go or whatever. Like, this is kind of ultimately optimal architecture, at least until someone tries to design a building that changes over time depending on what the current conditions are. Not sure if that's got a name yet. Everybody's gangster till we strap ailerons to the post office. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks as always to my elite level supporters. Thunderbolt 22A10, who designed a house that can do a backflip. Nomad Greg, who has an entire city block to himself. Andrew Mole, who doesn't blow up villages, he builds them in reverse. John Bejarano, who lives inside the mouth of an Alaskan bullworm. JDK, whose house has no load-bearing materials, it just bears the load out of respect. Mutantious Doom, who once engineered the gravity out of a skyscraper. Stormester Ritter, whose apartment building doesn't have an emergency exit. The emergencies exit when he enters. Nikita Lurie, who can cantilever a building with the power of his own quads. Aaron Rowe, whose toilet is a UNESCO heritage site. Bonk Chunk, who restored a building by creating a pocket of inverted space-time around it. That One Boy, who creates 3D renderings by projecting his thoughts directly into reality. Trenton Caldwell, who can pour concrete without the formwork because the concrete just obeys his internal monologue. Jimbo Quiz, who installed safety rails on his toilet so you can really dig in and get a firm grip. Draco91, who once slapped a column into alignment with his bare hand. And thanks to all my other supporters too. Don't forget to join the Patreon or the channel membership if you want to be featured in my video credits or chat on the Discord. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Over and out.